drama, Australian drama in the 19th century, then post-Lawler Australian drama, the new wave theatre in the 1970s, the second wave Aboriginal theatre, and will sum up after that. So, when you think about Australian drama, as I have already told you, that this field is a very neglected field and not much development of Australian drama we witness until the 1950s. And when Williamson, the name Williamson only comes to our mind as the first Australian dramatist who uh, came in the 1950s. And there is a remarkable coincidence that English playwrights who have written after that uh, have not got many acclaims except uh, Look Back in Anger by John Osborne. So, in a sense, we can say that what John Osborne's to Look Back Anger in England uh, was the same kind of effect. It was published and staged in the year 1956. John Osborne's Look Back in Anger, a very famous play. And around the same time, we have the play by Williamson called Ray Lawler's Summer of the 17th Dog. This was published around the same time, and it also is a watershed moment for Australian drama. So, the Australian professional drama or theatres opened from 1830s, and H.G. Kippax, in his introduction to three Australian plays, says, quote, it was one of the inspiration rather than achievement, unquote. The reasons are obvious because we don't have much importance of drama until 1950s, and the problems for which we don't have much importance on drama are the theatre suffered a setback during the depression. It was faced by steep competition from the world of cinema. Then number three, the Australian audiences refused to watch local talent until the plays won acclaim abroad. First, they had to be performed abroad in England and European countries. Then it came to Australian people liked it. Audiences wanted to watch those things which got acclaim abroad. It was a marked distrust between local writers and the commercial theatre. There was a marked distrust between local writers and the commercial theatre. So local writers were not looked with suspicion by the commercial theatre of Australia. That was also a cause of the decline of Australian drama. Most of the playwrights went abroad in search of artistic sustenance. Then the myth of the great Australian legend, made the playwrights turn towards the bush for inspiration, furthering leading drama into the wilderness. Summer of the 17th Doll was staged in Melbourne in 1955, and by the time it was taken to Sydney to rave reviews, it had already been acknowledged as a theatrical event. It was hailed as a truly authentic Australian play of international caliber. Truly authentic Australian play of international caliber. The London Times reported on 30th November 1955 that Hogg Hunt, the executive director of Australian Elizabethan Theatre, Trost had called Summer of the 17th Doll, quote unquote, the best play ever written about Australia, purely Australian, but the inequality to be compared with the work of Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, and Sino Sisi, unquote. This play, which was one of the two of to share the first prize in a competition held in the previous year by the Playwrights Advisory Board, seemed to mark a watershed moment in Australian drama. So, so according to the staging of this place, the summer of the 17th doll, the Australian drama, history of Australian drama was divided into two phases, pre-Lawler and post-Lawler phase. Then we we'll discuss something about the pre-Lawler Australian drama. So, like Australia, um, the depiction of the different environment and lifestyle of the settlers, it describes the lifestyle, environment, and lifestyle of the settlers. The most distinguishing characteristic of Australian life was that of life in the bush, an almost American wild west kind of scenario. The bush ranger, a desperado who fought the law, was this stuff that action heroes were made of. All the claimants to the position of the past Australian play deal with the bush ranger. So the bush ranger became a predominant theme in the pre-Lawler Australian drama. When we come to know about three dramatists, David Vaughan, Melville, and Harper. David Vaughan, who is often called the first Australian playwright on account of his considerable output, wrote his first play, The Bush Rangers Party in Tasmania. A man who had a foot in both the mother country and in the colony. He completed the play in Scotland and presented it on stage at Edinburgh in 1829. Bond's play was not performed or published in Australia till 1971 when it achieved both distinctions. This play deals with the life of a real life bushranger, an escaped convict named Matthew Brady, who was the leader of a gang in Tasmania. The real Brady was captured and hanged in 1826. In the play, Brady is shown as a defiant of authority and seeker of true liberty. He is a Robin Hood figure who saves a woman from being raped and a settlement from being massacred by quote unquote wild natives. An episodic play, its aim seems to have been to give an idea of life in the settlers' colony as much as to depict the adventures of an outlaw. Excuse me. Born whose other plays include the fair number of historical romances. Never wrote another play quite like The Bush Rangers, which was written in prose, unlike his other poetic plays. As Leslie Rees says in his History of Australian Drama, uh, Bourne must be given quote unquote full credit for being the first playwright to present an Australian subject from first hand knowledge. Uh, then we have the Narrowed Veil, which was printed and performed in Hobart, Tasmania in 1834. This was written by Henry Melville, a newspaper publisher who printed the play in his own Hobart Town magazine in April that year. It was performed in Hobart in May 1834. A three-act play, The Bushrangers, is made up of a tableaux. The play depicts a party of bushrangers attacking a settler's house in the bush. The settler is saved by his daughter's lover, whom he disapproves of, and a native Australian. Perhaps this is the first Australian play staged in Australia. In 1835, Charles Harpur published a poetic play which was later known as the Bush Rangers in the Sydney Monitor. This was in serial form and was then called the Tragedy of Danoy. This was, however, never produced, and Harper seems to have revised the play time and again. So the credit for the first published Australian play should perhaps go to quote unquote the Bandit of Rhine, written by Evan Henry Thomas, which was published in 1834 in Hobart by the author himself with the help of prior subscription from buyers. It is of interest to note that the other three early plays we looked at have all dealt with the subject of bush rangers. Then we will come to analyze the birth of the archetypal Australian male and the indigenous element in drama. The bush ranger seems to have inspired a certain respect and admiration among the early Australian writers. This was because the bush rangers seemed to typify the Australian spirit as well as appear a romantic figure. The highway robber was a romantic figure in England in the 18th century, and the early Australian settlers seem to have regarded the bushranger in similar light. The distinctive Australian ethos that developed also had a lot to do with both the convicts and the working class attitudes. Thus, the bushrangers were perhaps seen as more Australian than others. They were defiant of law and authority, and this free and thus free. They had to be resourceful and loyal to each other. Further, they had the image of being Robin Hoods, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, of being essentially kind people. This gave them a romantic aura as well. In the defiance of authority and their comradeship, we can already see the birth of the figure of the archetypal Australian male. Then will come to know about Australian drama in the 19th century. Among the various pioneers of Australian drama was Walter Cooper, who wrote Colonial Experience, foiled Australia 20 years ago, Son and Shadow, and Hazard. He wrote in the late 1860s and 1870s. A Sydney-based playwright, Cooper wrote popular plays, and perhaps his play foiled contains the past instance of what Indian film goers are so used to, a person being tied to a long log in a timber mill and moved towards a mechanical saw, um, only to be saved at the last minute. So, another successful play by Hopkins, Good for Evil, published as Clay and Porcelain, was set in London, Paris, and Venice. In his dedication, Hopkins talks of the central character as Mephistophelian Iago. He gives his reason for both the settings and the Mephistophelian Iago character by saying that the play was inspired by a popular novel by Cuda. Hopkins adapted Alexander Dumas' Chicot the Jester as only a fool in 1880. His other plays, LSD and Rasa as it is, or Michael Strogoff as the courier of the Jar, were also adapted from European sources. The last play was based on Jules Verne's novel. This play is remembered chiefly for a scene depicting a fight with a bear, a trained animal being used on the stage for the first time. Then, almost throughout the 19th century, the stage seemed to be available to Australian comedies. This was not the case in the early decades of the 20th century. Brett Bailey's success with the adaptations of Steele Rod's novels was a rare exception. It would seem that even homespun humor that had gone out of fashion, a few alternative sites did exist and soldiered bravely on, like, for example, in Melbourne, where uh, you had Gregan McMahon's repertory, William Moore's annual drama nights, where only Australian plays were performed, and the seasons of the Pioneer plays. The players performed 5 plays by its founders, Louis Isan, Stuart Mackey, and Vance Palmer. The music hall tradition was flourishing as was cinema. In fact, Australian cinema was very popular between the two world wars. So there was an audience for Australian essence in Australia, but it could not be found in the theatre. The lack of support, which would have enabled the dramatists to work with repertory companies and sharpen their craft, meant that there were no unperformed masterpieces from that era either. Peter Fitzpatrick actually finds the Australian plays that belong to the first half of the 20th century, quote unquote, more interesting for their flaws or their marks of potential or their reflections of the society or their evidence of the problems confronting the playwright than as dramatic achievements. When you come to post-Lawler Australian drama, so the publication or the staging of Summer of the 17th Doll is a well-made play, and its three-act structure is extremely well crafted. It is a naturalistic play, and it overcomes the problems faced by earlier playwrights in bedding this form to life in the outback by presenting the action within the living room, a space more attuned to the form. The characteristic conflicts of outdoor life, the conflicts of the human image are thus acted out indoors. The play allows the examination in a changed setting and allows time to think of the values of the that Australians had lived by and prided themselves on. The players characters, though stereotypical, have achieved the status of independent figures. Rue, Barney, Olive, and Paul are almost people we know and sympathize with. This is a play that looks hard at the ideals of male bonding, mateship, and physical power, prowess within the confines and needs of domestically and societal stability. The romance of the bush fails, and while it may be a question of youth versus age, the play does enough damage to the ideals themselves. Thus, the doll, which is a watershed moment in Australian drama, marks the culmination of the earlier period and efforts rather than the beginning of a new era. We will have to go through the suggested reading before we can know enough to agree or disagree with what we have claimed. And the staging of the play, we have to wait till the late 60s and 70s and the new wave dramatist before anything of equal significance takes place in Australian drama. Not that nothing was written or produced till then. Lawler himself wrote other plays, including two authors on the doll characters, to eventually complete the doll trilogy. Two significant plays that followed the doll were Richard Bayon's The Shifting Heart, 1956, and Alan Seymour's The One Day of the Year, 1959, both of which are naturalistic plays about characteristic Australian conscience and character. These and the other plays of this era examine the notion of Australianness that was yet to be redefined in the wake of post-World War II immigration. Then we encounter the new wave in Australian drama. The new wave that followed this period broke free of various dramatic conventions and theatrical spaces. This radical period saw plays performed in alternative venues like converted factories and warehouses and streets and other public spaces. This was the time of the Vietnam War and conscription into the army, and this is so politically aware um, and committed generations taking to the boards. This was rough theater at its best, anti establishment, anti tradition, anti pomp, and anti pretense. This theater identified itself with the working class, but the audience was not very different or more dramatic or in class composition. Those were plays for educated, young, middle class audiences. Politics took center stage over aesthetics, and audience intervention was a welcome part of the performance. Though these plays demolished earlier stereotypes, and the Australian male was satirized instead of being um, mythicized. The awkward figure which came into being now was actually questioned and critiqued rather than romanticized. Though the plays were urban and less masculine than the earlier plays, even though this influence of feminism was yet to be felt, they contested, received social values, and were heavily influenced by American writing and politics, as well as the European theatrical practice, especially that of Bertolt Brecht. Then, when you come to Patrick White and Dorothy Hebert, both important though not popular playwrights had already moved away from stage of naturalism to experiment with expressionism and surrealism. Poetic speech, symbols, and music, as well as the expression of the inner life of the characters, moved their place well beyond the limits of realism. The new wave, with their political commitment and community oriented theatrical practices, changed Australian theatre even more radically, along with the alternative venues, came in a more intimate theatre when audiences learned to interact with the actor. Then we come to know about the theatre in the 1970s. Uh, the politically committed theatre had a natural end when reformist Whitlam government came to power in 1972. The need for continued funding also governs the life cycle of such theatrical movements. Earlier in 1958, the National Institute of Dramatic Art had been established at the University of the New South Wales by the Theatre um, Trust. The trust was replaced as a funding body by the Australian Council for Arts in 1968. The council decided to support the state theatre companies rather than a national company. It also depicted to support the Australian performing group in Melbourne and Sydney's Australian Drama Foundation. This ensured an expansion of theatrical activity in the 1970s. The reputation of the Australian performing group was established by plays like Hibbert's White with Wire Wheels, Alex Bujo's Alex Bujo's The Front Room Boys, and Jack Rumrill's The Man from Chicago, later called Chicago, uh, all of which were performed at the Festival of Perth in 1970. 1970 also saw the first performance of the legend of King O'Malley in Sydney. This is a comic musical play. The and along with other plays like Barry of Oakley's The Feet of Daniel Mannix, 1971, and Beware of Imitations, 1973, and Jack Hibbert's Dimbula, 1969, A Stretch of Imagination, 1972, Les Darcy's Show, 1974, and A Toast to Melba, 1976. It developed what has been called the historical pantomime. These are political satires which use music hall techniques and devices. David Williamson also had his first full-length play, The Coming of Storm, premiered in 1970, which will explain in the next unit. Of this first wave, only Williamson, John Ramrill, and Alex Bujo continued to write plays in the 1990s, and among them, only John Ramrill shows the same political commitment to working class values and to the collaborative process of a play production that characterized the new wave. Ramaril has gone on to engage with the Asian experience. Ramaril's The Floating World, 1975, is a classic of the same status as The Doll and the Hibbert's Stretch of Imagination, and is a frequently performed play. This play is about the disastrous encounter with the Japan of Lee Harding, an ex-Japanese prisoner of war. Ramirez defines the Australian character in an international context, and this links him to the second wave of dramatists like Stephen Siebel and Louis Nora. His community theatre work is another important stand in contemporary Australian theatre. Then we come to discuss about the second wave. The second wave of dramatists who emerged in the late 1970s gave new directions to Australian drama. Their plays are characteristically complex and deal with important issues. These theatrically ambitious plays do not look to be masculine stereotypes for their exploration of Australianness. The Australianness that they chart is in terms of a quest, but the playwrights who begin to write now, like Stephen Sewell, Michael Gow, and Louis Noura, like their older contemporaries Dorothy Hewitt, Patrick White, and Almaty Groon, have been largely unsuccessful in terms of popularity. Sewell began his career as a Marxist, and his early plays are immensely political and international. They are deeply moral plays that show a wide range of theatrical influences. Traitors, 1979. Welcome to the Bright World, 1982. The first set in Russia and the second in Germany deal with the revolutionary history. The Father We Loved on a Beach by the Sea, 1978. The Blind Giant is Dancing, 1983. And Dreams in an Empty City, 1986, explore contemporary Australian politics. These are apocalyptic visions of the resurgence of fascism, the collapse of capitalism, and the power of multinational companies. Hate, 1988, Sisters, 1991, and the Garden of Granddaughters, 1993, are family psychodrama dramas. Sewell's plays are very different from Williamson's, who is an extremely popular playwright, because Sewell's plays are demanding and abstruse, using structures of myths, classics, archetypes, and symbolism. Louis Nara's early plays are also internationalist and vast. Um, Inner Voices, 1977, Visions, 1978, and The Precious Women, 1981, are set in Russia, Uruguay, and China, respectively. Nora's break with naturalism is more in terms of form than Sibyl's. He frequently uses the play within the play, and like Pirandello, draws attention to the artificialities of the theatrical representation as well as the narrative. His post-colonialist ideology is evident in the representation of the Aboriginal Australians. He dramatized Xavier Hubbard's novel Capricornia in the bicentennial year 1988, and the predicament of Aborigines is present in other places of his as well. Inside the Island, 1981, Sunrise, 1983, Crow, 1994, and Summer of the Alliance, 1992. Summer of the Alliance is a semi-autobiographical play, as is Ghost Cozy, 1992, and interestingly, Aborigines are present in both. Apart from three visions of displacement and alienation, Dura has also a farce satirizing corporate greed, The Temple, 1993, and a play on the recent history of Queensland, The Incorruptible, 1995. Then we come to discuss something about Aboriginal theatre. Aboriginal drama is expectedly political in its need for self-definition and assertion. Jack Davis, uh, Kulark, was, for example, written and produced because of the omission of Aborigines from Western Australian um, sequencentenary celebrations in 1979. It is an Aboriginal version of Western Australia's history, encompassing the time before and after the arrival of the whites in Australia. Um, Virgin Smell the Wind, which depicts Black Deaths in custody, was a protest against white bicentennial celebrations in 1988. The major danger for Aboriginal drama is that of appropriation, for after all, it is written in the language of the oppressors. Such protest also calls for realism in terms of characterization and style. Even so, Aboriginal drama contains disruptive elements like indigenous music, the use of didgeridoo and click sticks, for example, Aboriginal dancing and storytelling, and the use of untranslated Aboriginal language. So all these were the limitations of Aboriginal drama. Then, with this, we will come to a conclusion of Unit 1. So, in the nearly 2 centuries since the first war place in Australia, Australian theatre has struggled to establish its distinct identity. Various forces, including those of cultural links of Europe, hindered its full development till nearly uh, the middle of the 20th century. But the final decades of the 20th century saw the flowering of Australian drama into a more representational space to carry further the task that Australian theatre has seemed to have accepted for itself, that of defining Australia and Australianness. Now, with this, we'll come to analyze Unit 2, and where we will exclusively concentrate on David Williams' dramatic world. Uh, when we come to know about David Williams, he is the first major figure and perhaps the only major figure of Australian drama. And we have seen much of an introduction about Williamson. Williamson was born in Melbourne in 1942 and thus grew up during the permissive 60s. He graduated in mechanical engineering from Monza University and lectured at the Swinburne College of Technology, Melbourne, on the thermodynamics as well as on social psychology. The latter was to be a major preoccupation in his plays. Williamson started writing plays in the 1960s, but the early plays were mostly uh, reviews and a couple of short plays, um, which he himself does not think much of. He gained prominence as a dramatist with his first full-length play in 1970, and thereafter we have so many plays of Williamson, like The Coming of Stark, 1970, The Removalists, 1971, Dawn's Party, 1971, Jugglers 3, 1972, What If You Died Tomorrow, 1973, The Department, 1974, A Handful of Friends, 1976, The Club, 1977, Troubling Nora, 1979, Celluloid Heroes, 1980, The Perfectionist, 1982, Sons of Cain, 1985, Emerald City, 1987, Top Silk, 1989, Brilliant Lies, 1993, Dead White Males, 1995, Sanctuary, 1995, Heretic, 1996, and The Play Life, 1997. So, with these volumes, we come to know about the uh, place and performance of Williamson um, as a dramatist of reputation in Australia. The Coming of Stark is the fast full-length play by Williamson, and which was performed by La Mama Company, which troubled in taking on censorship in 1970. They had performed Bujo's Norm and Ahmed a year earlier and had received much publicity. The coming of Stark seemed to be the trailer made for them and their audiences. It was, after all, full of four-letter words. Fitzpatrick says that the dialogue of the play, quote unquote, has all the subtlety of footballers in the showers. Those were heady times for theatres around the English speaking world when dramatists experienced a sense of liberation, having their characters speak and behave with a complete abandon. Williamson uses his freedom to shock, but to shock into a sense of recognition. A satirist, he chronicles the life and times of urban Australia. The Coming of Stork is a play about three young men who share an apartment and on an interest in scoring with the opposite sex. The three, Tony, Clyde, and West, are pursuing different careers and dreams. Tony is writing his doctoral thesis. Uh, Clyde wants to make money and live on a cattle farm, and West is a salesman. There is a girl, Anna, who comes and goes, willing to sleep with whoever, though she seems to be Clyde's girl. Stock, a beer swilling graduate, um, who works as a gardener, the first of the Williamson's Larkins, enters the scene and wants to be part of it, including sleeping with Anna. He succeeds in his ambition when Anna, having fought with Clyde, picks him up and takes him off to bed. But Stark is not about to have the full relationship with her that he had earlier dreamed of because she has been kind to other men as well, including an older married man. To cut it short, Anna gets pregnant, and the older male friend of hers, uh, Alan, drifts off to his family. Clyde is to marry Anna, and Tony is to marry another girl. Stark and West, who are the best men, plus the rings down the toilet, continue to drink and decide to clear out. The play ends with the gesture against the institution of marriage. Then we come to discuss Dawn's Party. His other play, Dawn's Party, 1971, is perhaps the most successful of David Williamson's plays. It is an all-out comedy, and the lack of violence makes it quite different from The Removables. The seemingly light comedy depicts the state of middle class Australia. Once again, Williamson explores the institution of marriage, even as he looks at the state of politics and Australian democracy. Williamson uses the device of a party to bring together on stage a number of people who with common interests and backgrounds. Don and Kath, who are in their 30s, are the host. Don is a teacher and an author, though a failed one. The guests are friends from Don's university days and their women. This is a election night, and they have also come to celebrate a labor victory that does not happen. Each of the Randy men has been asked to bring a pornographic object to be displayed to others. One of them brings a nude photograph of his estranged wife. Thus, we almost see the protagonists of the coming of Stork a decade or so older. In this mix, we have two caste friends who are liberals, the pigeons among the cats, while the main ambition of the man seems to seduce the women. What we see is the dissatisfaction of both sexes with each other and the state of the nation. In this weak comedy, Williamson shows the complete lack of any redemptive values. The men do not even succeed in the acts of seduction, and the Labour Party loses, and the only non-university person complains that the graduates are on couch. Then we have Jugglers 3. Williamson's next play, Jugglers 3, has the Vietnam War as its background. The play was written and first performed during the war years in 1972. This is a play that Joe Orton, the anarchic British playwright, would have been proud of. A Vietnam War veteran, Graham is back to find that his wife Corinne is living with a university teacher. Neville uh, Neville tries to set things right between himself and Graham, but only succeeds in upsetting Graham even more. There is a table tennis game between the younger Graham and the older Neville, which must take some doing on stage. If Graham is the foul-mouthed, university-educated Williamson character who is out to shock, Neville is not too far from Williamson's usual cast either. He is not only having an affair with Corinne, he is married, has a child, and he and his wife are expecting another. The next character we see is Neville's pregnant wife Elizabeth. Then the two other war veterans arrive. The first, Dennis, has just robbed a service station. He too has found out that his wife is having an affair with another man. The next, Jamie, is a middle medical practitioner who is now involved in a project concerning Aboriginal children. Jamie's, uh, Jamie is Karin's ex-lover. Karin arrives and almost predictably dumps Neville, who finally returns to his wife and family. A policeman arrives to arrest Dennis, but finally ends up sharing the spoils with all the men. Karin and Graham, it seems, will stay together. So, the play shows once again the topsy-turviness of the moral universe of middle-class Australia. Marriage is a dead institution, and nothing else has taken its place. Gender relations are fraught with the problems. Language has to be fashionably of the lowest common denominator. It is the university graduates who have to establish the anti-intellectual atmosphere of Williamson's world. Um, Graham claims to have failed in English, sprouting lines like Shakespeare is a shit of a writer. But again, like other successful plays by Williamson, this is a thoroughly entertaining and fast-moving play full of characteristic verb and dialogue, adding to the entertainment in performance for the actors and the audience is the fact that not only has his characters playing ping pong on stage, he has them drinking beer throughout. Then we come to discuss the next play, What If You Died Tomorrow? In a nutshell, What If You Died Tomorrow, 1973, was first performed nearly a year and after Douglas 3 in this curious hodgepodge of a play, which has been seen as an autobiographical autobiography by some critics, Williamson explores the world of writers and agents and publishers. Andrew is a successful doctor turned author who has walked out of marriage and left his children to live with another woman, Christy, and her three children. He does not get along with Christie's children, and even his relationship with Christie seems to be on the downward curve. His agent wants him to publish his next novel with a new publisher, but the old publisher Harry Bustle arrives on the scene to lend it a great verbal vigor. Bustle is the coolly like Williamson character we have learned to expect. Then we have the department. Williamson's next play, The Department, 1974, is a wonderful exposure of manipulative politicking that finds a place of pride in universities across the world. The play is set in the thermodynamics lab of a university and takes the form of a staff meeting. So once again, in Williamson's a manner, we have the dynamics of interaction among a group of people as the material of play. Rabbi, the manipulative head of department, has called the meeting. The setting of the pipes and the tubes dominates the stage where the human characters play out their pretty power struggles. We are told that an enormous and expensive tank has been built by mistake in the mezzanine floor, and nobody had the temerity to fill it. The department jokes about his folly, even as Robbie tries to manipulate getting another building constructed. He tries valiantly to keep the staff together, even as they take offense at each other's behavior. Present in the meeting are all shades of academics, a resident radical, a scholarly embarrassment, a prickly lecture, and a pious liberal. Then we have another play, Handful of Friends. The next play, A Handful of Friends, 1976, is again set in Melbourne in a play that deals with the world of films. Williamson knew this world intimately by now, having written film scripts and the academia. The stage is used interestingly. It is divided into two spaces, one depicting the house of Russell and Wendy, who have just returned from the United States of America, and the other depicting the flat that Jill, Russell's sister, lives in. Russell is a historian and Jill a journalist. Their handful of friends include Mark and Sally, who are soon to arrive. Mark is a film producer and Sally is an actress. Mark is making a film and has put Russell in as a character. Sally wants the leading role in the film. As usual with Williamson, things are quite complicated as far as relationships go. Russell is established quite early to be a philanderer. He seems to have encouraged Mark to sleep with Wendy. Jill seems to have a crush on her brother, um, but she has had a crush on Mark as well, and perhaps an affair with Sally. Wendy is the one character who does not have much to say in this play, whereas much is revealed as is concealed. Everything ends in shambles, mainly because Jill publishes a scurrilous article about Sally in a cheap tabloid. Wendy leaves Russell. Sally no longer wants to play the leading role. Mark is happy to pillory Russell in the film. The end of the play has the return of Jill with a casserole, nice casserole, and news the mm, news she imparts to Russell that people have liked her article. Then this play also deals with marriage. Marriage is again a non-starter. People feel off, feed up people, especially in the creative world. What kind of a society is this? A pleasant little society we live in, isn't it? Says Jill at the end of the play. Relationships are tangled by definition, but for the first time, Williamson does not feel the need to shop with his language. The next play is The Club, published in 1977, resembles The Department and is equally well written. But now, Williamson is a master of comic structure, and The Club is a neat demonstration of his abilities. This play explores the goings on in an Australian rules football club in Melbourne. It is an all-male play with six characters. Ted is the president of the club and Gary, the secretary. Laurie, the coach, has announced to the papers um, and his intention of resigning because the team is not doing well, helped in no way by being forced to pick Jeff, a star player, for every match. Ted had begged Jeff, um, going to the extent of adding his own money to Jeff's salary. Naturally, he speaks of Jeff's bad patch. Danny, a player, threatens to organize a strike if Laurie resigns. Then there is Jack, an ex-leading player of the club who wants to be president. So this is the politics of playing football. Williamson is all about surface, as we seen in the after play, and the club is no different. We see the hilarious unfolding of a petty politicking, which ends in the defeat of the um, boardroom manipulators by the players who simply play to win now. Even Geoff, a spaced out non-trier, uh, joins the rebellion, realizing that playing is easier than not trying. Thus, the machinations of Gary and Jack are defeated while Ted walks out. Then we have Traveling North, Williamson's last play of the 70s, Traveling North, 1779, was quite different in sonner climbs in later life that many people in many parts of the world dream about. Does retirement make for a happier life? What happens to relationship in later life? These are some of the questions that run throughout the play. Then we come to discuss something about Williamson's later plays. Uh, Williamson's later plays from the next two decades of the 20th century with celluloid heroes. Nimrod's 10th anniversary was celebrated with a commissioned play by Williamson in 1980. This was Celluloid Heroes, 1980, a farce about the world of films with which Williamson was increasingly familiar. A producer plans a film which will be a tax write-off, that is a guaranteed box office disaster. This satirical look at the commercial aspects of the film industry immediately after traveling north perhaps signaled that Williamson was not going to desert the local for the metaphoric universal. He was also going to work within a broad range of comedy. Then we come to The Perfectionist. His next play, The Perfectionist 1982, is back to Williamson's favorite phrase, the state of modern marriage. This is the subject matter of the play foregrounded throughout in the battle of wits with the that the play deals with feminism, utopian Marxism, are all on view, but finally they are seen to offer no solution in the here and now. Stuart and Barbara are the couple who fight over the terrain. Stuart's father, Jack Gunn, who is a successful lawyer, is the defender of faith in the traditional marriage with its fixed gender roles, while Stuart's mother, Shirley, is an example of what the frustrations of such a marriage can do. Only in the play, Shirley, who had to give up a stage career to marry, states that quote unquote, women of ability and intelligence have only one option, and that's never to marry and never to have children. But the play does not take that any further. Any revolution is in the future, and the play ends with Barbara willing to come back to Stuart, hoping, hoping to balance family life and career. A wonderful comedy, it again offers a slice of life, even as it examines gender relationships. Then the next play is Sons of Cain, 1985. It is about a newspaper office, but it is also about the stop of headlines, corruption, and the nexus between the government, the police, and the big business houses, and their implication of in drug trafficking. The journalists of the weekly review discover that the Minister of Justice and the Prime Ministers are involved in drug trafficking. The issues raised there are of a moral as well as a practical nature. How are the management and the journalists to approach the matter when the political establishment uses the laws of libel to silence the press? Obviously, a play such as this is more political than Williamson's other plays, just as The Perfectionist allows the audience to debate issues of social engineering. However disappointing some may be with the positions, Sons of Cain allows the audience to debate issues of good governance and corruption. It raises many intriguing questions. For example, would you rather have a corrupt government that works for the welfare of the people or have a government which has never had people friendly policies, even if it were the model of probity? So, this is the dilemma that some Sons of Cain is involved with. Then we have the play Top Silk, which was published in the year 1989. Williamson tackles corruption of law in this play, and political correctness in universities provides him the subject matter of Dead White Males, 1995. In Heretic, 1996, where Williamson moves away from stage naturalism, he tackles the nature versus nurture debate, attacking Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, while supporting David Freeman. Then, when we look at the mm, Williamson's play in detail, we can see that they are all, some are satirical, some are comic, some are political. So he almost touches everything. And when we see the place like the coming of Stork, the removalists, Dawn's Party, and Jugglers 3, uh, they 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 all are satirical comedies that explore, in Williamson's memorable phrase, the April Australian uniqueness. Williamson defines this uniqueness as, quote, composed of an abrasive cynicism on the surface and a rather mawkish warmth underneath. Even the warmth must be expressed negatively. Hence, the Australian male habit of greeting each other with abusive, four-lettered expletives. It is also a celebration of Philistinism uh, and the rejection untimely um, of crucial values drawn from Europe. It is anti-intellectualism and frantic materialism and recognition that there are class differences in the sense of material wealth, but no substantial differences in lifestyle. Unquote. This is published in Sydney Morning Herald in 1972, 3rd July 1972. So then we will discuss something about uh, the successful plays. Five of his plays have been very successfully filmed. Who five of the plays were filmed, and we'll discuss something about them. The Coming of Stark, Dawn's Party, The Removalists, The Club, and The Traveling North are filmed. He has also written numerous other film scripts. If his mid-career move from Melbourne to Sydney, similar to signal to his contemporary Melbourne writers, is a betrayal of art for money. He has actually played a major part as the myth maker of the suburbia. Sure, he moved, but he continued his theatrical quest, the staging of the drama of middle class life, its concerns, its politics, its daily life, and his audience have always been mainly people like him. So he depicts reality as it is, as reality perceived. So Williamson, to sum up, we can say undoubtedly that Williamson is highly successful in all his aims, and if there is any reservation about him, it is based on the maxim that good serious writing cannot make money. His comic genius should not obscure the fact that he is making serious explorations of a specific social territory, and that it is entirely possible to extrapolate a set of values that forms the core of his moral assumptions. His plays can, after all, be read as crusades against corruption, against disloyalty, against institutionally sanctioned but meaningless relationships, against petty rivalries within organizations, against the blindness to the dynamics of personal relationships. So, this brings to us to unit number 3, where we'll see exclusively the play The Removalists. So, The Removalists is one of Williamson's early plays. It was premiered in July 1971 at Melbourne's Cafe La Mama, with Williamson playing the removalist. Within 3 months, it had travelled to Sydney and to its London performance at the Royal Court Theatre, and then to the United States. This, the second of his plays, established Williamson's international reputation. The play won 1971 George Devine Award in Britain. It was the mm, first time that this award was presented to a playwright from outside the United Kingdom. It also won two Australian Writers Guild Ap- APGI awards in 1972. So, if you look at the play in detail, we'll come to know that the play is remembered because of the violence depicted through the language, certainly provided us with a simple, uh, ample food for thought. If we happen to get a hold of the currency play press publication of 1984, we would have noticed three articles before the uh, actual play begins, entitled quote unquote Reflections on Violence by Ian Turner, Authority and Punishment, the Australian Inheritance, and the third, Police, Authority and Privilege by Frank mm, Gelselli and Kerry Millet. It is all right if we do not have this publication. It will be included in the reader, but we would like you to read them before you begin reading the rest of this unit. What does Turner talk about in the first article? He says removal raises three questions. One, sociocultural. Is Australian society violent of its essence? One, political. Do not forces of law and order rest on violence? One, psychological. Do all of us have the kinds of aggressive instincts or behavior pattern which Williamson depicts? Uh, Needless to mention, we are all aware that Australian society was born in violence. The convict system bears testimony to this fact. On the face of it, Ian Turner mentions that Australian society is relatively more peaceful than most, but that is all that is all at the public surface level. Unquote. He feels that violence lies latent in this society and finds various means of release. He gives various instances from the play where violence is depicted, but it against women or against a man, be it against a woman or against a man, and the process through which violence is recorded physically, mentally, and verbally. He concludes by saying that such violence can end only when a new society is created, one which would recognize the unique rights of all individuals and generate ways of living in which now the aggressions which pervade our community would simply not be needed any longer. Then when we come to characterization, we also find some interesting observations. The first character we meet are the policeman Sergeant Don Simmons and Constable Neville Ross. Uh, the setting is a new but already depicted decrepit police station. The sergeant is trying to prompt the constable who is new to the job. What do you think is the purpose of this scene? Is it merely to to raise some laughs? What happens before the other characters come in and why? If the why bewilders us, what is being said here is what does the author attempt to establish in the interchange between Ross and Simmons? The stage direction at the beginning of the play states that Simmons is surveying Ross, quote unquote, as if he were auditioning him for a crucial role in some play. The long phrase that begins the play is finally broken by Ross asking for instruction. Simmons has already scored a point, already asserted his supremacy. He now acts the old seasoned policeman who is willing to extend his patronage to the young constable if the constable is willing to play by his rules. The first question he asks is about Ross's father. He had already established that Ross is a callow youth and now checks out on the father, whose place of authority he had taken even in Ross' workday world. Ross is embarrassed to talk about his father and this immediately provides Simmons with enough support. Simmons uh, has begun the scene by emphasizing the essentially corrupt nature of the world of the police in a very matter of fact way. Quote, the money could be good if you happen to be in the right places, but this isn't one of them. One payoffs here, boy, a few perks, but no payoffs, unquote. He speaks of incompetence in the world of carpenters, having been told that Ross' father is a carpenter of sorts. He then talks of his daughter, and the trouble she has because her husband is a Catholic Mick. Simon's wife is a Catholic too, but Ross is not. Since Ross is not a Catholic, um Simmons gives up the line of conversation because it has no profit for him. So he moves on to talk about the money that has made without too much effort. He advises Ross to organize himself. This entails not working by the rule book. Life goes its own rules. Life has got its own rule. Then we have the establishing mateship through authority. This theme is again an important one in the play. Ross is then one to be smart, think on his feet. He is told that he has a lot to learn before they can become a team, and that first he has to unlearn what he has been taught at the academy. Simmons is then sarcastic about the kinds of violence taught at the police school. Uh, quote unquote, they teach you how to shoot people, then beat them up as well. He is proud of the fact that in his 23 years in the force, he has never drawn a gun or made an arrest. When Ross asks aggressively what he does then as a policeman, Simmons pulls rank, seniority, and age, and then Ross still does not tell him what his father does. Simmons narrates the story of the constable whose sister had been raped. His overreaction to another case of alleged rape cost him his job in the force. Simmons thus seemingly proves that he needs to know everything about Ross and asks him again about Ross' father, who turns out to be a coffin maker. Simmons insists that Ross is embarrassed to talk about his father because he deals with the dead. The two sisters, Kate and um, Fiona, arrive at the station almost immediately after this. Thus begins a different movement in the action of the play. Simmons has Ross where he wants him, subservient to his authority. Then you see women as the object of her desire. The arrival of two women seems at first only another opportunity to test Ross. By the way, have you noticed that the play refers to the two men by their surnames, while it refers to the two women by their first names? Simmons begins with a double um, attendry, grinning lecherously. Let's have it. The sisters have come to report martial violence. Fiona has been beaten up by her husband. Sorry, marital violence. Fiona has been beaten up by her husband, full of homilies. Quote, it's a pretty terrifying when the family unit becomes a seat of violence, unquote. Simmons goes on a fishing expedition to find out more about the sisters. He is also investigating whether there are any excuse me possibilities for sex with the two women. Now, with this, we will come to discuss something about Act 2. This scene begins immediately after Rose expresses hope that his girlfriend Marilyn not find out about him and Fiona. Ross is thus looking forward to a liaison with Fiona, who in turn is working out on her husband with the child and the furniture. The slides to be shown here are of Ross with his family and with Marilyn and of Fiona with Kenny and their baby and of Kate with Fiona's baby. The idea of a slide with Kate holding Fiona's baby serves as a visual reminder that Kate wants to take over Fiona's life. The slides demonstrate and destroy any ideas we might have of a happy family life. Then Kenny is a Mako male, uncouth in behavior and speech. The gender roles are fixed as far as he is concerned, and he is doing the right thing by his wife simply by walking in to drink at home instead of with his male friends. And he thinks that his wife should be happy to fix him a meal. He is, after all, the master of the house. It is soon obvious that he has come back home because he is in the mood to make love, and in the ensuing conversation, eh, it is made clear that they had made love even the previous night, the night after, which she had made up her mind to leave him. And the night he had beaten her up immediately after making love because she had not emptied the kitchen tidy. He feels that a wife and a mother should have done it by herself, and the punishment he had meted out was just. It is also established that Kenny resents the role played by Fiona's family in his life. Obviously, there is a class difference at work here, and as much they were looked down on the Kenny's ways, he resents um, their poor behavior. Kate's arrival now allows him to put on a show for her of the lower class, brainless, uncouth male because Williamson wants us to see him playing a role to the hilt. Kenny's native wit is demonstrated early in the exchanges between him and Kate. When Kate asks him what he is watching, he replies, television. It's a new electronic wonder that's just filtered down to lower classes, keeps their brains nice and soggy, unquote. He deliberately stops himself in the front of Kate and glaring at her, asks her, quote unquote, don't you like my manners? Then, when we come to the ending of the play, we have a tragic ending to the play. Now, Simmons starts raging Kenny and involves Ross in the action. Ross refuses to let Kenny be beaten, even though Kenny has been made to speak against him. Simmons knees him anyway. The next piece of action is actually initiated by Kenny because the policeman finally releases him, writing, reading on the floor, and begin to walk away when he threatens Simmons. Rose is ordered to arrest him, but Kenny threatens him with a chair and also abuses him, calling him a coward, among other things. This is the final straw for Ross, who launches himself on Kenny in a ferocious assault, which continues off stage. Ross comes back, convinced that he has killed Kenny. Simmons continues to give him valuable lessons in bearing up people without leaving any evidence, as also about writing reports. He finally goes to have a look, and he too thinks that Kenny may have died. The seemingly still comic play suddenly changes track. When Ross suggests they cover it up, Simmons has only objections to it all and says that Ross has to take the rape of what he has done. It is then that Ross, who is increasingly anxious, says that he could pin the murder on the sergeant because there have been witnesses to the sergeant's assault on Kenny. They are both hysterical about what has happened and its probable consequences when Kenny staggers in. They do not even notice him till a little later. For the moment, the comedy seems to have returned, and we can actually sit back and relax in our chairs. While Ross is relieved and wants to get a doctor for Kenny, Simmons does not want any evidence to be recorded at all and votes the idea of a doctor, vetoes the idea of a doctor. When Kenny states that he is going to have his wounds certified by a doctor, and anyway, Simmons offers him a quid pro quo female companionship. Kenny negotiates with Simmons about the call goals, and they both agree to the terms. Kenny mm, wants his bi-weekly free visits to the call girls to continue even if Fiona comes back to him. Ross is bewildered by it all, and even as they drink a beer, Ross gets further lessons in police work. This is a pure satire at work. We are not allowed to feel any sympathy for Kenny or even for Ross, but just then Kenny actually dies, and the two policemen are back in their hysterical state. They blame each other again, and Simmons once again tries to pin the responsibility on Ross, who in turn advocates collective responsibility. Ross begins to hit Simmons, saying that if they hit each other sufficiently, they could make it look as if Kenny had gone berserk. The play ends here with the stage direction stating that, quote unquote, the fight almost takes on the air of a frenzied ritual of exorcism. The play begins with a verbal skirmish between an older and a younger man, with the older striving to assert his authority, to defend his territory, and ends with a ritual fight between them. This is a fight called for by the young man, not so much to displace the older man as to defend his own sense of security. So, to sum up the play, Uh, the action of the play consists of a series of dramatic movements. The initial interrogation, the verbal skirmish between the sergeant and Rose, is almost petering out when the women arrive to move the play forward. The Kenny Fiona scene is getting nowhere when Kate arrives. We do not want to argue this out completely, but the play moves forward again with the arrival of the policeman. The verbal and physical violence that ensues is again acted out in units which are interconnected by small catalysts of action. We can identify these units easily. The play is prolonged to its final conclusion because of Kenny's taunting of the policeman. The penultimate unit is caused by Kenny staggering back, and the action takes on a surrealist comic hue when they discuss the call goal scheme. The final unit is the result of the actual death of Kenny. Even every time we think the action is going to flag, the play gets a push from someone's arrival or something that is said. This, in a way, is a fair reading of the way in which this action of the play is constituted, that is, the structure of the play. This allows the play to use the readers, audience's reactions or expectations, playing them off against what actually happens in this play. Since the reaction is broken up and we cannot be sure at any point where the play is going, we ended up reflecting on the action, evaluating it, and the characters, nothing noting the byplay between characters and the wondering where it will all end. We are not caught up in the rush and tumble of unitary action that moves inevitably and inexorably towards a conclusion, however unexpected. What we see is almost a series of accidental interaction between characters who feel forced to behave in a certain manner. We see a society where several sexual prowess, physical strength, and stamina play a great role in the lives of man, and because of the gendered hierarchical nature of society, in the lives of women as well. So this brings to us the last unit, uh, the themes and techniques that we encounter in the dramas. When we come to the themes, we could notice that other than the note that Williamson has placed in the beginning of the play, denying that it is specifically targeted against the police, he has also written an article on the play, which we shall refer here. This was published in the uh, Minjin Quarterly in December 1974 and is called The Removalist, a conjunction of limitations. In the article, Williamson argues that the play is not an anti-police play and that he does not quote unquote and cannot write from an ideological standpoint, at least not from a simplistic ideological standpoint, unquote. This is misreading. This is a misreading. He says had led to arguments in the first production when some actors had wanted to tough, toughen the play in its supposed anti-police stand. In his opinion, the others had no actual acquaintance with policemen, while he knew some personally, especially his own uncle. Williamson's uncle had never punched anybody in his life, and interestingly, quote unquote, he proudly claimed to me once that he had made not a single arrest for 14 years. We can see how Williamson uses the last statement so creatively in the play. Williamson's position is that ideology oversimplifies characterization and the complexities of a given social situation. His interest, he says, is in the interaction between the three major male characters in the play: Simmons, Kenny, and Ross. Then the issues of the play are very interesting. Williamson had got the plot of the play from a story told to him by a removalist that he had used. The removalist told him about, quote, the great day he had last Friday. He was shifting the furniture of a wife, leaving her husband and a couple of crops had come to help the girl and her sister. When the husband had got stoppy, the policeman had given him a beating. Williamson felt that what was interesting was that the removalist had identified with the policeman. He felt that the husband deserved a beating and that the policeman had every right to beat the man. This gave rise to the play where the situation is led to run to its ultimate conclusion. So, obviously, the removalist represents the silently collaborating voyeuristic society that collaborates by acceptance in the violence. Not only is the violence accepted, it is admired and as the natural and necessary expression of authority. Hence, the interaction of the characters is not only an expression of their individual personalities, but also of societal structures and conditioning. Thus, the play is a profound indictment or exploration of the way in which violence underpins Australian society and its mores. Then we will take the opinion of Ian Turner about the play. In the past article, Ian Turner says that, quote, the removalists raised three questions. One, sociocultural, is Australian society violent of its essence? One, political, do the forces of law and order rest on violence? One, psychological, do all of us have the kinds of aggressive instincts or behavior patterns which Williamson depicts? These are very pertinent questions in the context of the play. When you analyze this quotation, we find that the answer to the question number one is Australia is quote unquote a more peaceful society than most, but he feels that there is a deeper level of violence in Australian society, but that this finds expression, quote unquote, in outlets which are socially approved or in modes which are unthinkingly accepted socially. The obvious example are the games that the Australians love, Australian rules, football in particular. Um, the violence of the game is mirrored in this accepted behavior on the grounds as well as in the expectations and the approval of commentators. The modes which are unthinkingly accepted, which are imbued with violence, and those that relate to male female relationships. Turner feels that this is so not only because the anti women nature of the Judeo Christian culture, but also because of the Australian code of masculinity, which positively isolates women in their role as sex objects. The answer to the third question is that we are all capable of violence because of the nature of power, and we will only change when social structures change enough to recognize the unique rights of all individuals. When you think about characters, it has some interesting insights to offer. The Ocker figure here is the course, of course, Kenny. What are we told about him? What is he like in action? What do we make of him? In Williamson's own words, in the article we have already referred to, Kenny's quote unquote self esteem is totally bound up with the conception of himself as a great hawker and a great fighter, a man who can absorb any amount of punishment without giving visible signs that he is hurt, unquote. As pointed out in the earlier, the ochre is pushy and crude. He asserts his masculinity through his heavy drinking and tough talking and boasting about his female conquests. The ochre is aggressively articulate and lives for maternal material pleasures. Nothing else matters for him. Does this define Kenny? The problem with the ochre figure is that even if you find him likable in his anti-authoritarianism, you will have to admit that he is no individual who respects the rights of another unique individuality. The ochre, who has to boast of his sexual conquests, cannot imagine a world of gender equality. Further, almost by definition, he will have to bow to forces superior to him in their drinking, sexual, and physical abilities, and anathema to him. Hence, he has to keep proving his superiority in these fields. Then, another gripping issue of the play is the balance in the play. Kenny is as complicit in the system that finally kills him as the others who beat him up or watch it happening. For each of the male characters, their notion of the self is bound up in performative terms, in terms of sexuality, authority, and approval. They have to find assurances about their motherhood, manhood. In these terms, we have talked about Kenny, but Simons is no different. Simons is, as we saw in our earlier reading, is the older male safeguarding his territory from possible challenges from among the young. This territory is the police station. He is Simons the sergeant. Notice how he is always referred to either by his surname or designation. It is the formality of his authority that defined his being. People had a better respect to him. He has his own police station. His examination of Ross in the beginning of the play is to uh, assert his authority to impress on the young recruit that he is dealing with a master of their vocation. He ensures throughout the action that Ross does not forget his position. Furthermore, he creates or grabs opportunities for sexual liaisons. The goal racket mentioned at the end of the play only confirms our opinion of him. He is full of prejudices, for example, against Catholics. His anger with the Catholic faith's attitude to contraception is explained poignantly later when he says that he could not make love to his wife for 5 years because he was not allowed to get pregnant. 5 years was all he could wait, though. He has the same attitude to women as any true blooded ochre. They are game to be head at will. He acts the tough policeman for the benefit of the ladies, but quite enjoys it. His position allows him to hit without fear of retaliation. He too is a star in his own estimation. When we discuss about the other issues, other themes of the play removalist, we find the marriage motif as a prominent one. And how is marriage? The punching bag of early Williamson depicted in the play. We have three marriages, two that are talked about, and one that is depicted. The Sergeant Kate's and Fiona and Kenny's. The institution of marriage comes off pretty badly, doesn't it? It seems that Kate stays on in her marriage for purely economic reasons, as he says about Ralph, her husband, quote, quote unquote, he provided a good life for me and he my children, and he's a fine man. Shares affairs, sexual liaisons with various men, and argues that too much fuss should not be made about affairs these days. Marriages seem to be a bad trap, which the partners try to make the best of in their own ways. The duty of a husband may still be to provide, but what are the other responsibilities that come with marriage? And what are the duties of the wife? It seems that mm, what we have is travesties of traditional marriage. So, marriage is an unsuccessful and purely commercial in intention. Then we come to the most crucial issue of the title of the play. Uh, when we think about the title, we come with a series of questions. Who are the removalists in the play? Is it a jocular reference to the fact that Ross assists the removalist in shifting the furniture? Is it a reference to the fact that the policemen change the roles when they offer to help the women shift house, or the policemen the removalists? And if they are, is it only a simple reference to the role that they want to play in the lives of two women? Are the removalists for the life change place taking here impact they have on people's lives? Isn't Kate also a removalist? Is there uh, not enough evidence in the play that she not only encourages but has actually persuaded Fiona to move? Why even Fiona's mother, who is contributing towards the new flat, is a removalist, but people who move you from one unit to another in the same structure reinforce the structure and in fact profit from it. They are removalists and not revolutionaries. The removalist thinks only of money, the policeman of the women and authority, and Kate of getting rid of the lower class Kenny. Even the death of Kenny is accidental. The policemen do not really want to remove him from this world. There is no profit in that for them. In the struggle over territories of various kinds, everybody acts the removalist, whether consciously or unconsciously. Have you heard this word removalist before? I doubt it. In India, in this term is unheard of. In the United States, they are normally referred to as the movers. In fact, in this term seems particularly of Australia's. So we will have a brief reference to the language used in the play. Then we will sum up. The first reference to women in the play is to the sergeant's wife and daughter. The sergeant describes his daughter to Ross in these words: "Quote, not bad looking, mind you, and a good horse, but she is an irritable bitch, her mother all over again." Unquote. These lines thus refer to both women from his family, and Simons describes women in terms of their body, and their character is described in terms of the animal world. The next reference is in the story, and the sergeant tells about a previous constable, the girl who campaigns of rape in the story is a little tart, the tart, the biggest bike, and the silly bitch. So the language seems to be filthy and authoritative, and it favors the male authority. Then, when we come to the technique of the play, this is a seemingly conventional realistic play in terms of technique. A traditional two-act play, it makes use of realistic devices of proscenium theatre, as John Bull says in directing the removalists. Is a note appended the text of the play in he and the cast, quote unquote, were a bit of apprehensive at first about its four-square conventional structure and unfashionably strong naturalism. He feels that the physical space that they ended their production in had a lot to do with the impact of the play. The actors were never more than 5 feet from the audience, and often seemed to be about to fall on the fast row laps. He says he coupled with the play's unpredictability and the built-in shocks, quote unquote, this is sheer physical proximity generated a fair deal of real nervous excitement, unquote. Now we'll have to sum up the play now. So various themes are analyzed in the play. The removal is which addresses and studies the way the play uses language and the conventions of the realistic play in order to fully explore its concerns, as well as to involve the audiences in the action and the subsequent reflection. Um, and we will see how the questions someone was asking um, in the last class. We can think about some questions here also. The title of the play is very important. You can get a question about that, a comment on the title of the play. Then the aspects of various aspects of violence in the play. Then the removalist fits into the early phase of Williamson's career. Then how the removal is a critic of Australian society. Then how the marginalization of women characters in the play, and then the impact of language in the interpretation of the play. Then critical note on Williamson's naturalism. Then humor in this play, and the individual character analysis of the play. So these are some of the expected questions you can have for your assignment or your final um, paper. And I think with this we come to an end um, of our assignment, and I can only think about your performance and your mm, approach in the examination. You make some preparations, some written preparations before you appear your examination and try to have a thorough revision of that preparation. And with that, you can do well in the examination, both in assignment and in examination. And if you have any problems, you can tell me through the group, and mm, we can sort out your problems as far as practicable. With this, I would like to end today's proceedings, and I hope you have at least got some entry into the nuances of Australian literature and the various themes and dramas and novels and poets and their poetry. All are exposed to you, and I hope it will benefit you in your future attempt to master Australian literature. Mm, and thank you for your patient hearing. With that, I would like to end the proceedings which we had for 8 classes at a stretch. Uh, Thank you all.